All right, as you can see, I'm here on a weekend recording this in a down jacket. The heat is turned off, so that's awesome. But I decided to help you out with a little bit of a Cliff Note version or a shortened version of what the key points are of Judaism. Remember, we are studying Judaism right now as part of one of three of what we're calling the Abrahamic religions, because Abraham is a person in all three religions that kind of links them together. And the first word that you definitely need to know is monotheism, and that's the belief in one God. And Judaism is the oldest religion in the world. Scholars believe it's about 4,000 years old, or maybe a little bit more. And Abraham's called the father of Judaism because, according to history, God visited Abraham and made a sacred agreement. He made basically like a contract or an agreement with Abraham called a covenant. And a covenant's very important to know. And he promised that Abraham promised that everyone after him, his descendants, would follow God's teaching, and God promised to love them. So that was the agreement. And then Abraham's descendants were known as the Israelites, sometimes called the Hebrews. And they are anyone who's an ancestor of a Jewish person falls under that category. And according to the Torah, which we said was the Judaism's most sacred text, it's the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. That's called the Torah. Abraham picked up shop and moved to Israel, and along the east coast of the Mediterranean Sea, and he formed the tribes of Israel, and they settled down there for a while. They traveled to Egypt to escape famine, which is a shortage of food. And then they were enslaved by the Egyptians for a long time. And so the Jews were enslaved by the Egyptians, and then God performed a bunch of miracles to free them. So, when they went back from Egypt, back to Israel, God revealed himself to Moses on Mount Sinai. And according to Scripture, Moses saw God's laws. And this happened on Mount Sinai. Moses sees God's laws on a stone tablet, and they are called the Ten Commandments. Yes, the Ten Commandments, same ones we have in Christianity. So Moses is praying, sees God, sees the Ten Commandments on a stone tablet here, and that becomes kind of the rules for Judaism. And again, Israel is their promised land. And they settled there, and they had many kings. King David and his son Solomon created a temple, and the temple is a sacred place where you pray and you come together. But when Solomon died, Israelites split up into 2 people, and basically they were weak and then they were conquered. So people invaded and took over, and we get what's called Jewish diaspora. And that's another vocab word, Jewish diaspora. And diaspora means dispersed. They were moved out. So all the Jews were basically kicked out or dispersed. Jewish diaspora. And this is known as the time when the Jews couldn't live in their homeland. So Jewish diaspora happens, but the religion survives. The Jews stick together, stressing the importance to their homeland. They always face Jerusalem and Israel when they pray. And then the Jewish leaders we talked about are called rabbis. And the word rabbi means teacher. And the teachers were really important because without their own homeland, they had to rely on these teachings, the Talmud, oral teachings, and the rabbis basically would speak about the ethical practices or the moral day-to-day practices of Judaism. What is hateful to you, don't do to your neighbor. Basic things like that, how to be a good person. So the rabbis kept the religion alive. Some main beliefs of Judaism were in the Torah. The first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, and then in that is the 10 Commandments, which I said were like the 10 rules, and handed from God to Moses. You shall love no other God before me was the first commandment, which is really big because that takes us back to monotheism. Most religions at this time had tons of gods, which would be polytheism, but mono is one. And so that's a really important idea. Another commandment that was really special was to set aside a holy day each week called the Sabbath. And this later happened in other religions like Christianity, which is on a Sunday. So the other commandments talk about moral values. Remember, it said basically how to be a good person. Honor your father and mother. Forbid stealing, lying, murdering. Basically, that the Jews have a responsibility to live by God's moral teachings. Stresses equality. Basically, help your neighbor out if they're stumbling. So those are the teachings and core beliefs of Judaism. Now, the diaspora, the disbursement, caused many struggles for the Jews, and it was really critical that their people stick together in order to survive. So Judaism ended up spreading throughout the world based upon these strong communities of people, Jewish migration, sticking together. And so they made their way into Asia, Europe, the Middle East. It was not adopted widely by different cultures, but the Jewish communities were built and popped up around the world. And they continued the religious practices that were important to them, studying the Torah, observing the Sabbath. So they have a great impact on the world. They impacted monotheism. Two other religions, Islam and Christianity, are monotheistic. We're going to learn about that, the belief in one God. The ethical conduct, how to be a good person, that was basically what the teachings were about. And justice and equality. So those are the core beliefs, and that's your basic summary on Judaism. All right, we'll move on to Christianity and Islam.